Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the beautiful world you are. I hope you're all having a wonderful Easter. Always a good time to be with family. And as is usual where I live, it's raining. But that's amazing. We like the rain. It's been dry. And of course, I have with me today Miles Johnston again. We're going to be talking about all sorts of exoconsciousness, things that happen, call it out of the human realm, shall we? And but before we do that, I am just going to pop up the schedule for this week's shows. And so we are right here today, actually an hour earlier than usual. So I just want to, for those of you guys who watch these shows, just please take note of the time change. I am going an hour earlier, usually 4 p.m. So from now on, it'll be 3 p.m. Central Africa time. But it still remains the same, I think, for the Brits. And tomorrow morning, rerun with Rachel Vaughan. Always, not a rerun, but it's not been on YouTube before. So catch that one with her. For the foreseeable future, we just down to one show with Jesse for the moment on a Wednesday. So catch us at 3:30. And then in the field with Shanti on Thursday on Solutions, Protection Patterning Series. And I think this week is, are you really strong? Or is that just a part of your patterning? Your protection patterning. Okay. And then, of course, on Friday, no, that is Sunday, actually. But Friday, oh, yeah, there's Friday. Sorry, I missed today. We're doing, of course, the Drop In with Shanti, the sequel to The Fall of the Cabal. It really is a good documentary to watch because it really shows us behind the scenes what's been going on. And it's nice to hang out with you guys and we just kind of all watch it together and comment. And very annoying, to say the least. Anyway, then of course, Saturday, nothing. Sunday, there's the Patreon members book club that we just had on. This Sunday is going to be aired on Solutions. And that's the Book of Giants that we've just done with Jesse yesterday. And then Sunday night, catch part 4 of my shows with J.R. Sweet. And if you guys haven't caught any of my shows with him before, wild, very crazy testimony. He was trained to be a CIA assassin. So all the gory details that come along with that. Anyway, we're having him again on Sunday, so please join me for that. And that's going to be at 7 o'clock Central Africa time. And without any further ado, let us bring on the man of the moment. Ta-da! Miles, how are you?
Well, this is Easter, and we've had -1, feels like -1 all night. And that means it's sort of, we don't have the cloud thing, which is why it got cold. But now, because we don't have the cloud thing, we have a bit of cloud. It's now 30 Celsius. It's 29.3 Celsius in my conservatory where I do my thing. So what I've done, I've made an executive decision. This is called decision making.
Yes, I like it.
And when my friend Colin is here, I try to pretend to talk in an extremely serious manner, because Colin is one part of the extremely informed team called, he's Professor colon Woollyford, and as in the part of the body, colon, not the punctuation mark. And his colleague is one of the sort of blog medical people here in England, called Ben Emlyn Jones. And to keep in vogue with the term colon Woollyford, this all connects with the alien autopsy, by the way. So a connection, right? But we don't want to go there. So the point is that Professor Colon Woollyford will talk of an extremely elevated and intellectual manner, and his colleague Ben Effluent Jones will talk a similar load of whatever, rude word, insert word, that a colon would emit.
Bollocks.
I don't know what your ears are in your audience, but basically on a Sunday morning when people are maybe have had a celebration or whatever it is, we open on a Sunday morning to give an elevated spiritual, very highbrow discussion on things. So Dr. Colon Woollyford would be a fat git talking shit, and I've got this wrong. Professor Colon Woollyford would be somebody in a weird, bright, oversized T-shirt talking shit, and Ben Effluent Jones. In other words, Ben Effluent. In other words, what he's saying is effluent. So he'd be talking shit in a big fat T-shirt. So you got two fat gits talking shit. Now, in order not to insult people, and we're taking this very seriously, Chantel. I'm not appreciating this laughter look that you've got on. This is a very serious matter. It's basically for those old enough to remember Monty Python.
Yes.
They had
who can forget Monty Python?
They had a highly controversial film called The Life of Brian, which had no connection with Jesus Christ whatsoever. He just happened to be a bloke who lived at the time of Jesus Christ. And like a lot of people, he was, crucified and all that. People had this weird idea that it was about the life of Christ. It wasn't. It was called The Life of Brian. So, of course, this was a whole Monty Python thing. So there was an extreme row in Britain and in Ireland. They even allowed it in Ireland because they at least saw the joke. And the point is that the BBC at the time of this terrible film, which was obviously a joke and nothing to do with Jesus Christ, they had a brilliant gentleman called Malcolm Muggeridge. And Malcolm Muggeridge was the most elevated, educated, highbrow English person you could ever imagine could be at the BBC. And he didn't see the humor, being an intellectual and a boring git, but very precisely important and speaking about things of an enormously important nature in a very elevated and important way, importantly and precisely. And Monty Python were brought on to discuss the life of Brian. And they lost their tempers. They were going to repeat. They were going to explode. It's a highly controversial thing, and it's really good to watch on YouTube. So the point is that my colleague Colin, who has been in the United States talking about the alien autopsy, which of course is a fake, and it's a very clever fake, and it's done by a magician or a former magician, and it was marketed by another guy called Ray Santilli. And I was involved with Sky TV saying, no, this is a load of bollocks. Excuse me. Don't run with this story. And so the British UFO Research Association, who were part of this scam, because I think there was money involved. I think there was money involved with this. They wouldn't let me see the film. So as soon as I did see the film, when everybody else saw it, I knew this was a fake. It was television pictures mixed with film. And in 1947, when they had the alien autopsy, and many, many more of those things were going on, and that's horrendous and very serious, you didn't have 625 standard definition digital video cameras in 1947. So it was a fake. So there's a whole crisis about that. So anyway, the point about this is that yesterday we were able to watch the Bob Lazar film, which was launched, and it was on Joe Rogan. And we watched the film on Amazon, bought it, cost I think $17. Now this is very important because and it's topical, because Bob is not a UFO guy, he's a physicist. And that was the boundary. This originates in 1988 when things changed. Oh, my picture went click there. I've decided to record this, so I might include whatever. Anyway. So in 1988, I was doing KISS FM 103.7, which I've told you about. And I have the point about KISS FM 103.7. It had people from Radio Caroline on it. And we had our huge transmitter power, effective rated power to get a signal into Belfast from the Irish border. We were 45 miles away from the center of Belfast. And normally when you broadcast, it's a hell of a bloody, you broadcast FM locally. So we had to really pump up the watts and get that signal, directional signal, to Belfast. And there was a whole thing about it. And I got fired from the BBC and cried into me beer and all that. BBC had some kind of a thing about its employees setting up pirate radio stations in foreign countries, broadcasting back into Belfast. I mean, they fire you if you don't have a TV license. But that's about the only way you can get fired from the BBC, apart from making jokes about the transport minister. Anyway, the thing is that was a strange situation on how that happened. It was a manipulation. It was a mechanism to manifest this and have a 1.2 million watt pirate station, which we broadcast for only a total of 9 months. And we had people from Radio Caroline on, which is a big deal because Radio Caroline had to go on the air in 1964, Easter Sunday, 1964. They had to go on the air to broadcast any kind of a single or a bit of music, because the BBC was such a closed shop. And on that subject, guess who the head of the BBC now is? A previous executive who ran Google.
Who?
So I don't want to get too precise in the details because it could be wrong, but here we have a Fabian organization, which is the BBC. And Bob Osborne, who he may come here, I don't know. Bob Osborne has written a whole lot of stuff in Zenner, written a whole book about the Fabians, London School of Economics, Fabian, wolf in sheep's clothing. They manipulate business and they manipulate things. The people who go to the London School of Economics obviously get trained up in business and how to do things. And they have in their coat of arms or their logo, they have a wolf in sheep's clothing, and that should tell you their agenda. And the Fabian agenda, of which, for instance, Tony Blair is one of those. And it was interesting watching the U.S. military give advice and information. A former very high-level general was giving advice on this whole war in Iran, and that involves trade routes on land and power of the sea, and a whole lot of stuff involving trade with the Far East on the I think they call it the Silk Road across Europe and all that. Even described Blair as crook of crooks, and he's a Fabian. So when you have a Fabian involved with the control of people's consciousness and broadcasting, agenda which is there to manipulate people's consciousness and under total control from a parasitic organization and people involving ETs infused into people's bodies. It was one of the places we went to yesterday, was this place in Wiltshire where there's this alleged windmill which is shown characteristics of very, very strange features and fluidic space and perspective errors. I noticed that yesterday. So this is a pile of stones, which could be, some people use as a windmill, and it's on the map as a windmill, as a viewpoint. And you can see it's a wonderful vantage point, and it's beside a drug rehabilitation center called Cloud's House in East Noyle. And you can go there and you can walk around that part of the world, and there's lots of things there if you want to pay attention, such as portals for good things and portals for bad things. And
How
yes,
do you discern? How do you discern what's good and bad?
One of the people who is under very close surveillance, they're a very good friend, a very lovely lady, very wise lady, who in a previous life was a woman bishop at Wells Cathedral. And whatever she did wrong, she was stabbed to death on the steps of, there's a little annex in Wells Cathedral with, I think, an 8-sided chamber where everybody would sit round the outside of the wall, and it's all got things on it. And the bishops that were involved with that are carved in stone above each one of these little alcoves that the bishops would sit at. And her face as a woman bishop is carved in one of those stones. And
Wow.
whatever happened, she was stabbed to death. In other words, gut ripped. And she has carried over that injury and had problems in this life. And she lives right down, literally maybe 500 yards away from this windmill of this area at Cloud's House in East Noyle. Oh, I've just lost all my screens here. That's something's connecting. I think that's usually when they plug in another server somewhere. So the point about this, this involves active, remember, soul swapping and other observers. So the point about it is that right next to this windmill, certain observers, i.e. this lady that I mentioned, I'm not going to mention her name, she has picked up extremely dark energies there in the trees. And there's a whole bunch of trees, all the same species. So at the same time, somebody has planted an awful lot of trees to obscure this area. And they're all twisted sort of trees. They're
right.
So they shed. So a lot of them, the branches haven't come out with leaves. So we saw that yesterday. And when I brought Dr. Amir Tanjiri, who's actually an Irish Iranian guy, and he practices his very advanced healing techniques, and he had to do some healing on me because I was being esoterically, shall we say, bad people had wished bad things upon myself.
How could they? Bombarded. You were being bombarded.
Yeah. It was a bit stronger than that. It was a stake thing, the old stake through the heart thing. So anyway, that was
how did that manifest for you, the matter of interest? I mean, if you feel it, if you felt, obviously you would have understood it or seen it spiritually.
Well, according
did it
to
actually manifest physically as a...
they hauled me into hospital last summer with a racing heart. They said they sort of I had cramp. I had a very bad leg cramp because there were certain individuals who came to a certain place who wished ill of me, and I left that place without ripping their lungs out and tying them up with their own entrails on a lamppost, because that's what I wished for these individuals who were very nasty and saying impolite things to me about certain aspects of my creative person. So I was very angry about that. I got very angry about that. So cutting to the chase, I had a very severe leg pain. So I went to because I'd actually pulled a tendon, and So I went to hospital, and the hospital decided that I had an extremely serious heart condition. And they said we didn't even want me to get in the car and drive to the hospital. It was so I could die or something. You know, the old sort of heart condition you can die from thing.
Sure, Miles.
So they then kept me in hospital for 3 days last summer. And meanwhile, I had really sore leg issues, and they couldn't give a damn about the legs. I don't want to go into this whole sort of thing. But he picked up that the source of the heart problem was this stake pushed right into my heart esoterically by the use of magical rituals from 3 royal personages, right? So that situation was corrected, and we'll move on from there. But he came to that site to get impressions, and he picked up on an intelligence at that site. And I did a whole thing on it and I brought my friend here. We decided to go to, we've got this screen just went black again. So the point is, we went there. He did some sensing, determined that there was some very powerful force there, and it was the top part of this tower, which is a round small tower of it's only about 100 feet. It's not very tall, but the key aspects of a windmill is you've got to have the windmill on the top, but it's also got to rotate in the wind so that the structure of the windmill itself, the actual fan section, the propeller section, would rotate, so it would be able to automatically rotate to follow the wind. So you have a turnstile on the top of a windmill, which allows you to rotate that round, so you will get optimum, thrust from the wind.
Yeah.
There is no way that thing had such a structure. So there's no point having a windmill which just operates in one direction. So it looks like a windmill, so they've called it a windmill, but it's actually a round. The other thing about it is it's got round, relatively small round stones to build this thing with. So from a structural point of view, if you had something with wind loading on it and rotational, it wouldn't be a good structure to retain its strength, to not fall apart. So I've mentioned this before, but the point about this is that we picked up energies there further down the hill, actually across where it's a part of England where there's trees there for like 500 years. They're very, very old trees. And there is another portal, which is a positive portal. So you've got something with the negative and the positive within a quarter of a mile of each other. Right. And that's what the other individuals picking up the energies. So it's got a place of quite a lot of interest with this.
Where is this exactly?
It's called East Noyle with a K, and it's south of the A303, and it's on a map where it says there's a windmill, and it's on a hill with a wonderful view of you'd be able to see the wonderful south rolling downs of England, and it's near Guildford. It would be north of Guildford, which is a regional town. I think it's Guildford or Gillingham.
And
Gillingham, sorry, it's Gillingham.
Gillingham. Did you say that it's? I want to just write that down. Did you say that it's near to a drug rehabilitation center?
Yeah, Clouds House functions as a in other words, drug addicts would be brought there, and they would be go through a recovery process to get out of their drug habit and things. And it's a charity thing for doing that. That's the actual manor house. This structure is not in the grounds of the manor house. It's near it. That's all.
Yeah, doesn't have to be
But
on it. It's just near it.
the device or the structure has been determined. Again, we can't prove this. You can't go there with a bucket and spade and find there's an underground chamber with where they swapped over, souls and bodies. That's on a hill, at least 2 to 3 miles. With the height of the hill, and it's maybe what we're looking at is maybe it's like a Silbury hill. It's got a flat top and it's got sort of flat, equal sides to it. But without properly analyzing that hill, from our perspective, it looks like a Silbury hill, but it could be a protrusion of land. So it's let's put it this way: we're on this hill. There's a lot of flat land and farms and fields, and then the next thing that's a hill is directly down from this structure. And you can go up there and view it, and there's walks around that area. It's a lovely place to walk in the forest and the trees and stuff like that. However, it does have these artifacts, and with Maria Wheatley, I think I mentioned the last time we went there, and she got some extremely high level torsion field measurements. There's an active energy field that her instrumentation, which she's been given to her by Richard C. Hoagland, and she does a show with Richard C. Hoagland and David Sereda, and she's been given this instrumentation to make measurements near megaliths and standing stone areas to see what the torsion field measurements are. And she always backs up her measurements with a sample in an area which is just neutral. And you get a reference, but you get a reference measurement when you do this sort of stuff. So near in the direct location where this object is, you got these enormous signals, which were 4 times. She had to rescale her graph 4 times so she could get them peaks of these peaks going up. And they just kept on going up. Huge signal plus huge signal negative. But also the linear time reference was variable. Okay, so on her, so we would assume that time would travel in a regular manner, right? But it didn't. There were time variation artifacts in there. And because yesterday I made a further observation that there was a perspective error. So we had walked up from a thing called a little bit of the crossroads up there amongst the forest and the trees, just at the back of Cloud's house. There's a back entrance there. It says private, no entry. So, please don't feel you can walk in there and just whatever. But the distance between where those crossroads are and where we'd parked, which is right beside the little viewpoint area, was too far. The perspective was too far. And this is what I've had a very detailed discussion with Rebecca Hayworth Wright, and she deals with exoconsciousness. Okay, so she does a lot of work on that. And this kind of error was at my pirate station, Energy 106, and we called it Alien Mountain just for fun. But Alien Mountain is near St. Patrick's Chair in Well, in the very northern part of Monaghan. There's a which is at the border area in the middle of the north of Ireland, and the town on the Northern Ireland side is Ochnacloy, very long name, Ochnacloy, and literally within the thickness of the border that you would have on a map, right beside where we had our transmitters, where we transmitted up until 2005 with Energy 106. We went back on the air. Very unusual that would be allowed to broadcast for almost 10 years from that site. after Kiss FM closed way back in December 88. There was fluidic space in the actual transmitter container. So this is a 20-foot steel container where one end of it had perspective errors. Now, I called it fluidic space. And my discussion, I had a discussion with Rebecca about all this stuff, and she said yes all the time. She was familiar with these effects. She's arguing and suggested that it's intelligent plasma, and this is where consciousness comes in. And
Yes.
Robert Temple and other experts, astronomy experts, have noted there are clouds of plasma before the moon and after the moon. As the moon rotates around the Earth, there is a cloud of plasma on the pressure wave before the moon, and there's another cloud of plasma, I'm really paraphrasing this, after the wake. So if you've got the moon and there's a whole sea, a plasma sea out there, that the space is not empty, it's a plasma sea.
Right.
So that's why
that's consciousness. Plasma is consciousness. It's
consciousness. That's the point.
Yeah.
Exoconsciousness. So we have a situation on the surface of the planet at Cloud's house, for one, that's a reference mark. I'm not saying Cloud anyway. So we had fluidic errors in the dimensions. So there's a Mini, which is quite a large car. A modern Mini is quite large. That Mini, for want of a better term, was only about 300 yards away. It was too small as it came up the road from the crossroads to park right beside where we were. Now, what happens in these situations is that when you start entering such places, zones, you suddenly get people turning up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I've heard that for sure.
So, for instance, we were on our way to South Wales, and with Miriam, my friend Miriam, who is does her own thing. She has a lot of stuff on Miriam Janse. She's Dutch, and I think I've edited some like 500 plus of her videos. There's 2 or 3 minutes of, maybe 4 or 5 minutes of wisdom and whatever it is. And she's a very effective and passed with distinction, first class distinction, at a training school in London, in the Tavistock region of London, near Euston Station. So she has passed with distinction. She decided to get an English language qualification as opposed to get it in Holland. So it has more, and all the laws, like a third of the course is all about law, what therapists must do and take notes and all that. So a very heavy course, and she passed that. I think it was Sue Allen. Sue Allen was a brilliant healer and perceptive person who did a lot of courses at the College of Psychic Studies in London. And she passed her course, Sue Allen Therapies, with distinction. Sue Allen's obviously retired and stuff now. This is about 20 years. Well, no, early 2011s and 12s and 13s, around about that time. So it was Miriam who picked up on the other base, where she determined that there was a soul swapping operation there, a laboratory, and this is like 2 years ago, and it was closing down, and the ETs running it were leaving.
Why?
So this is where this is a lot of ET stuff has changed, and your good friend Beverly has explained this on a good few occasions. So she's switched on things. She's a brilliant lady, and she'll be appearing at the Basis conference, Basis 2026, in the third weekend of June, if we can do anything, depending on what's going on. So the point is that Miriam, who had been qualified by these very high level people and with a certain amount of passed with distinction, detected that this base, which is directly opposite the pyramid, not this pyramid, the source, this cone. And Dr. Amir said there's also a ring of stones around this. And then he detected that this was part of a much larger antenna system or some kind of apparatus, which is esoterically not in our necessarily 3D space. If you open the doors of this windmill structure, I mean, this is all locked up, but it has been open to the public. There are a set of windows at the top in a structure, but for some reason, the windows at the top, there's 4 windows at the top, and they are off by about 15 degrees.
What do you mean off? Like off center or what?
There's 2 windows. There's 2 windows or
Yes.
ports
Right.
in this structure. There's windows. It have 2 windows on the structure, one side and the other, and they're at 90 degrees to the 2 doors which you gain access to. One door is for use to going in, and then we determined that the other door only had people leaving because of the wear and tear on the northern exit from this structure. But if you were to get inside when they had it open to the public, which is what they do, in order to they do this with bases, they do this with that basically they tidy the place up, invite the public into them. The Rothschilds do the same thing. They'll open up their house, one of their mansions, and people can have an open day.
Biltmore, they do that, yeah.
Yeah. So
and then when you watch, actually, sorry to interrupt, but I was exactly on that train of thought when you spoke about the Rothschild, because in some of the interviews I've done with Jesse, we've exactly spoken about that. But it's also then what they do is, like, for example, right beneath a restaurant, they have a human taxidermy. So there's all sorts of gross things happening literally beneath the surfaces of what humans are being offered. So again, it's like an energy harvesting exercise to go there, because they're literally, that's what they do. They'll make it look beautiful and what have you, and give you all sorts of stuff that they think you might want to hear. But at the end of the day, there's always a nefarious agenda with these guys. So it wouldn't surprise me. And that's why I say, it's all energetic, and you know how these guys work with energy. They know exactly what's what in the pot. So it makes sense that they would have that near, let's say, a drug rehab or something like that, where people are still pliable, harvesting the loosh, stuff like that. And it makes sense that have a dark portal there as well, because and then of course the balance has to come in, doesn't it? So as you say, 1/4 of a mile away, then there's another one again that is obviously for creatures of the light and not of the night.
I got a phone call just as we went on air with an unknown number, so I'll have to chase that up later. But it's never a coincidence when you're just about to do something, somebody strange calls.
Absolutely.
So that's the basic point. But we've talked about, I've mentioned this structure before. It's a nice day out if you want to go walk about in the English countryside. And we went to we had been our path on the first time we did this at Christmas, just before Christmas. Our car was swapped from going west to going south and then north. We were swapped. So I've mentioned that before. And I just wanted to demonstrate this to my friend Colin, who has been a supporter and helped me on many occasions. And sometimes he crashes out here, and we drink beer sometimes too.
No.
Really weird.
An Irishman drinking beer? Or was it Guinness?
He is Irish. He's actually English.
Yeah, you.
Yeah. I'm from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, but you still drink Guinness.
BBC Northern Ireland. We don't have Radio 1 here. We have Radio 1 with an AW in the middle of it. One, like a yarn. Anyway.
Miles.
I don't need to go through the various languages of how you pronounce English. The Queen hasn't a clue. She had such a bad accent, nobody'd understand. All these plums in her mouth. Yeah, this is a Queen. Anyway, so I think I lost my train there. But the point is that we had delayed our breakfast this morning to go and see my friend Claire, who worked at Sky TV, and she didn't turn up. We wasted the whole morning anyway. So this is so the point is that it's the fluidic space signatures, and it's similar fluidic space signatures I noticed when we were flying from London to Belfast, because there's another big breaking story that's just happened. Where Radio Caroline was built in Carlingford Lough, on the border area between the Republic and Northern Ireland, near the Mourne Mountains. It's Carlingford Lough. It's on the east. It's sort of the main big loch between Belfast and Dublin, and there's another couple of big beach areas which are all very nice. But the point is, this is between two very high mountains, and Mourne Mountains in Ireland, and we're going to be on the 19th. We're going to hopefully have something on the 19th, because we're bringing people onto the conference from the United States. We have to just see what's going to happen in terms of people being able to physically fly come that date of the 20th and 21st. The 19th will be an evening event, but it's there just so that if people on the Friday night want to be able to see something happening, that may be available. But as I say, so the point is that there was when we were doing UFO stuff, you've got the Lake District. The Lake District is basically a large volcanic structure of volcanoes and granite mountains, which is basically opposite Belfast, right? And then below that we've got a bay in the way England works, and then opposite that there is Carlingford Lough, where you have the Mourne Mountains reach the sea, and then we have the Irish border. And in the 1990s, no, it wouldn't have been the 1980s, there was a major UFO event where somebody got a big UFO flying over Carlingford Lough, and he actually was a chemist, and he actually owned the chemist at Carlingford, the village or the town of Carlingford, which is why it's called Carlingford Lough, and that's in the Irish Republic. This was published. He managed to get one of the pictures to the newspapers, and this was published in the Sunday newsletter, which is the Northern Ireland paper published in Belfast. And then a picture of this disc craft hovering over Carlingford Lough. Right? He took his pictures and developed them in the chemist shop in Carlingford. And they were visited by a couple of assets from the NSA and the CIA. And they took the pictures. And he never got them back. So the only record of this is in this newspaper article, right? Now, further along the road, back up onto the mountains there at Carlingford, in the town of Newry, which is the seaport entrance to just north of the border. Up there's a place called Camelot. There's also some standing stones in that area, in a place called Camelot, which is just literally on the Irish border with the north, in the mountains of the mountains there. Now there are a number of volcanic lakes there. There's one lake. In other words, it's an expired volcano, and it has a lake in it. Now, what happened was in the 1950s, for some reason or other, an American spy plane decided to crash into that lake. And that lake is so deep, they could never recover the wreckage because it just goes way down. Now,
Then it can't be a lake. It must be a black hole.
well, it's a lake. It's full of water, but it's where the crater of the volcano is.
So do you think that was contrived, that it went down there?
Well, why did it choose there to crash? I mean, if you're going to go anywhere, why go there? Now, the point about this is that nearby there's stones. There's a number of very steep mountains at this area, and it's on the Irish border, which is why it is a border. It's a border area because of the way the geography of the place works. That's the way borders work. It's a natural border. There was a cattle mutilation case there. Now, I don't know if you are aware of cattle mutilations, but this was a very serious case, and it involved some friends of mine who were working for British intelligence. It also involved one of the best UFO researchers in Great Britain called Tony Dodd. And I think my friends are just arriving here. And he took the pictures, and this was a classic cattle mutilation. I don't know if you're familiar. This is very gruesome. But basically what happens is the anus is cored out. There is a patch on the side of the stomach, and there is white material on it. And the whole lower part of the cow's jaw is completely missing. You've got the raw bone, and there is no blood in the carcass. The carcass is completely escaped with there's no blood on that. So there was a cattle mutilation case in that area. So we have a UFO in just literally about a mile away in Carniford Loch. We've got a strange crash of an American spy plane in one of the top lakes of the top of the mountains. And we've got this cattle mutilation case. And you've got a megalithic structure there, which is very old. Right?
What structure?
You have a standing stones, a ring of standing
right.
stones.
Megalith, yes. Okay.
So what's happened is that this is exclusive. This is exclusive, direct from the source. On the northern side of the north of Ireland, which is the border area at Londonderry, also mainly known just as Derry, and it's got the border. It's lock with Donegal. It's right on the border. So you've got the Northern Ireland side, which is Londonderry. That's the county of Derry, County Derry. You have the city of Derry, and then you have Donegal. And Donegal is the county which extends further up, way north and west, where you have that's the furthest northwest section of the British Isles, right? Now, what's happened is that Nick Pope, I'm sure you know who Nick Pope is. Do you know who Nick Pope is? No?
Remind me, please. The name is kind of familiar, but tell me again.
Nick Pope was the Ministry of Defense, and he worked on the Ministry of Defense, and he dealt with the UFO desk for the Ministry of Defense. And then he retired, and I interviewed him the day he'd retired, and he's on one of my basis interviews, and I got a 1-hour interview with him. And literally, he'd just walked out of the MOD the previous day or on the previous Friday, and I managed to get an interview with him at my house in West London, and he explained a whole lot of things, and he's very eloquently and well trained when he's saying things. He's for instance, when he gave a presentation on the UFO events at Rendlesham Forest, he explained in the course of his very long presentation, this is just an example of how he would double speak He explained that the radiation levels at Rendlesham Forest in the Rendlesham Forest area beside RAF Bentwaters and Woodbridge were very significant. If you go there with a Geiger counter, very high levels, where the landing of this one of the 5 objects, a lot of objects happened at the December 1980 events, most of which are being covered up. And identical or very similar events happened in that forest in August 1977, 3 years before. And that's been covered up. And one of the things which has also been covered up is that in the warehouse, in one of the hangars at the Bentwaters base, or it could have been the Woodbridge base, I think it was the Bentwaters base, there was the nose cone, a recovered nose cone of a space shuttle. Now, this showed signs of sea corrosion because it had been lying in the seabed for a while, and there were stains where the flexiglass front nose cone of the shuttle had broken up coming in. The point about that is the shuttle wasn't officially flying until later in 1980. I think the shuttle, I think it was December 1980, so it would be 1981. I think the shuttle went up. So the point is, if somebody could correct me on that, I think 1981 was where I was in London, and I was working for Standard Telephones and Cables in telecommunications and building telephone exchanges. So the point about this is that a shuttle, one of the purposes of RAF Woodbridge, it had a very, very long runway, and it also had 2 other runways for, it was built during World War II, and planes coming in who were intact but just needed to land would use the proper runway. Planes coming in who had a bit of damage would land on the grass beside the runway, and other planes would come in who just wanted to get down, would crash land, and the B-17 bombers, and they would crash there. So the Rendlesham, the RAF Woodbridge Bentwaters facility has been a rescue base since it was built. And there were stories of tall whites landing at the Woodbridge base during the end of World War II, right? And it was also a base used in the movie with Gregory Peck saying 12 o'clock high, right? And that base had a number of UFO events which have a smell of the secret space program. That's why the objects which landed at Capel Green, and the movie about that has been completely shut down and suppressed because it featured Larry Warren. That movie has now, I think it's been on release or tried to be released for about 11 years. They did release it, and it's been shut down with legal action to stop what they were doing, getting public at Rendlesham Forest Bentwaters events. So the point about this is that I'm getting sidetracked here. We're talking about Loch Foyle, right? At Loch Foyle, Nick Pope, this was to talk about Nick Pope, for Christ's sake. So, and his example, how he said in one part of his talk, there were significant radiation readings, and 15 minutes later, he said there were insignificant readings. So he contradicted himself within 15 minutes of what he says. So it's very rare for Nick Pope to make a mistake when he's talking about stuff. So Nick Pope has joined the team doing Ancient Aliens for Discovery Networks, I think, and he has emigrated to the United States and got US citizenship. So last week, 2 weeks ago, he was in Derry filming underwater objects coming out of Loch Foyle between the former RAF base Ballykelly, which is now, I think it's now called Eglinton Airport. What they do with these RAF bases is they make them into a civil airport to keep everything working. So Eglinton Airport, right beside the Ballykelly area in the north, and in the south, the corresponding town in the south of Ireland is called Moville. That's just across the border. And in between, in Lough, which is Derry is Northern Ireland's second biggest city. There's stuff coming out, objects coming out of the water. That's a USO and becoming UFOs. And people are getting pictures of it. And they've had 20 different types of object have been coming out of the sea between Ballykelly and Moville on the coast. Now, Nick Pope has been there, and for him to be there and to be involved with this subject, with 20 objects coming out for probably it's aired in the UK on Bravo the Bravo channel. They have a whole UFO series and stuff, but that's probably end up being looking at this happening indicates that with Nick Pope, who's announced he's got terminal stage 4 cancer, to get him from the United States to Northern Ireland and to do this is a major effort, right? The guy's got cancer. They brought him over to be on the TV on camera at a place where they're now saying 20 different types of undersea unidentified objects are, or what they would like to call now UAPs, whatever, a UAP, aerial phenomena, but coming from the sea. And on the other side of Northern Ireland, you've got a place where they've had UFOs photographed entering the sea at Carniford Loch. And opposite that, you've got the Lake District in the northwest of England, which has got a whole pile of underground bases and nuclear power stations along the whole sea. I think basically the whole coast of the Lake District, bordering Northern Ireland, is owned by the MOD. There's radiation. There's nuclear power stations there. A couple of nuclear power stations. So this.
I'm interested to know. I have no doubt, of course, there is a lot of alien species, for want of a better word. I'm interested to know your thoughts, though, on the NASA and their shenanigans that are also doing all sorts of...
That's a low-budget pile of crap.
But what I'm... Yes, I understand that.
The very important reason for this, right? When I did the Amash project, I wanted some pretty lights, right, to give a bit of a splash to what we did with the Amash project in 2011. Pretty lights. They're vertical standing, colored fluorescent lights, right? You get them different colors, right, and they're cheap. Go down to one of the Chinese stores, you buy 3 or 4 different colors of them. They stand up. And they're nice. What they did was to do a promo for this multi-billion-dollar operation, to interview these astronauts who went up in this thing, right? And he said, "Oh, this guy's a family man, and he's all this sort of rubbish stuff." Very, very low caliber, cheap little promo to promote this multi-billion-dollar space thing. Now, the key to it is, and I noticed this when they did Apollo 12. Apollo 12 had the captain of the Apollo 14. Apollo 14 went up there just after, obviously, Apollo 13. Right? And it's interesting that the Apollo 13, it actually did orbit the moon. It actually did orbit the moon. And Apollo 8 did orbit the moon, right? Now, whether you know, where did he land is another whole thing.
That is the whole thing.
The point about this is that in the shots of one of these astronauts, oh, he was on the space station. Now everybody's looking at this. This is the climate of people looking for a hoax, right? The atmosphere about NASA is going to be people looking hoax aware, right? This is important. So you know people don't believe what you're saying, and then you produce a promo which is so badly put together and cheap. So what do they do? One of these astronauts, what do? They show him in space, in the space station. There's YouTube videos about this. So in the climate of this is a whistleblowing hoax and we're not telling you the truth, NASA is saying so in this mission, right? Now, the point is, have you got your hairspray? Listen, Chantel, go down to the hairdresser and get your hairspray and get your hair to sit up vertically with a bit of hairspray and hold it there with some tongs. So it's obviously hanging up like this, right? The point is that it's been whistleblown that a lot of the pictures that they have been showing as pictures from the space station are people with wire braces on them.
Yeah.
One of the wire braces that they use is at the back of the trousers, midriff, right? Now, when they do that, the weightlessness produces this little pull-up of the clothing, of the t-shirt or whatever they're wearing. And it pulls up like that. And then the wire holding them, as they've got the chroma key behind them of the inside of the space station, you see where the wire with the clip is, because he's.
But also, some of them.
Wait. No, but the cut. You can have lots of things to edit in an edit, right? They chose his edit to have him floating in space with an obvious clip on the back of his shirt, showing it's a fake chroma key shot. Now, they only show it for 3 seconds, 4 seconds. That means that NASA is whistleblowing its head off, showing this is a fake.
Exactly.
Which is why somebody did a bit of AI in the whole thing. I just made the whole rocket into a balloon. You know, just showing. So why are NASA showing this is a fake? At the same time, they have Nick Pope on a major story about stuff coming out of the sea in Northern Ireland. And why choose Northern Ireland? Now, way back in 1984, I was met by a British, he was a Belfast businessman who had extremely high-level remote viewing abilities. And he interrogated me when I got back in 1993 for my first trip to, it was late, it was Christmas time or what the hell it was. So I got back and I had a hell of a time being interrogated by this particular asset, which was a remote viewer. Now, in order for him to be shown and become in his training, the Ministry of Defense or whoever was running him, the point is, in order to make him absolutely secure in his understanding that we are dealing with aliens, he went to a place northwest in Northern Ireland. And he went a little bit further, not at Londonderry or Derry. He went to Sligo up there on the coast. Now, Sligo is on the coast of Donegal and Otzi, but believe it or not, it's in Sligo, the county Sligo, right? Just on the border with Donegal. But that is where the deepest part of the ocean gets closest to the continental shelf of your European continental shelf. So you've got Ireland up here, and you got the deep sea under here, and you got Sligo. So if ETs wanted to come up without being seen in the shallow waters of the continental shelf. They could come up there, and you could have a liaison, because they're not going to be too close to the surface and be seen. Okay, so that's where he was told to go and take pictures, and they had a display on, so he could take photographs, 35mm pictures of all these flying things flying all over the place, right? If you got all these fancy pictures, and that was 1993 or 94, right? Okay, so that's what they used for him to be convinced that we are dealing with ETs, and we are dealing with them, and they deal with us. And he got 35mm pictures of this. So now, 2 weeks ago, Nick Pope has gone up to roughly the same area, because he's a British citizen or a British asset. He doesn't go to Sligo. Well, the other guy was a British asset as well. So he decides to get his TV pictures to go on a disclosure program talking about aliens in the same general area. And he's got 20 different types of object. I'm not saying they are craft. I have no idea what they look like. But Nick Pope, to fly him from the United States when he's got stage 4 cancer, to go to here, to be seen in Northern Ireland at the same rough location within 100 miles, 50 miles, of ETs coming out of the ocean. That is another big whistle blow.
Yes,
I have been given this information, and I'm telling you on it. You're getting the exclusive on this, apart from the fact that I did it. I did a little blast on it 2 days ago, a day and a half ago. And guess what happened?
What?
And guess what?
What?
I'm sitting in this very chair, talking to this very microphone, going into this very mixer here, recording this very words coming from my mouth into this microphone, into this recorder over there. The very same thing. The instant I stop yapping about this, my phone rings with a restricted number. Somebody is giving me a little message that they know I've just said this, which is why I'm telling you.
So it just happened today as well.
Saying that just before we started this, I got an unknown number phone on this. So there you are.
So we have little alien eyes on us, but that's fine. I mean, it's very interesting, because I think, you know, the reason why I ask that is, obviously, we as humanity have been warned for a long time there's going to be a, you know, disclosure on a fake alien invasion. But I think what we really need to understand is there are fake aliens, right? And there is most certainly the real deal as well. So again, I think we need to, as the general public, right, we need to be aware of these things. And, you know, it's kind of, again, understanding that. And it's interesting what you said, because the picture you talk about NASA with the guy being held up, I've seen that. I've also seen CGI pictures of hands going through things when they're supposed to be up in space. And, you know, when the guys came down from, I don't know how long on the moon, their hair was short and bristly and, you know, like just they'd been to the barber. So, I mean, if you're going to be in space for a while, you're going to have a little bit of a hair on your head, right? So
the thing is, when you looked at the press conference with Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong walking onto that stage, if you've just had your face screamed at by somebody, and the next thing you've got is to walk on stage, those guys had been given a talking to. And the whistleblower was another guy, a brilliant man called Patrick Moore. Now, Patrick Moore was the science guy for astronomy with the BBC. He was a brilliant guy. He'd actually blinded himself because he looked at the sun using a telescope, so he had a glass eye. So he had this odd look, and he was a classic British gentleman. And he was very, very smart. and he did a number of little awkward questions. One of the questions was, why couldn't we see the stars on the moon? That was another big awkward question. And he also, in these science programs at the BBC, it was called The Sky at Night, and he was a wonderful gentleman. I got an autograph for him on my 10th birthday, 1967. He autographed this book, Milestones, 1967. I've still got that little astronomy book. And he was explaining about the pictures coming from Mars, or I think it was the Pioneer 10 pictures coming from Jupiter, or whatever it is. And he just would leave these little telltale remarks. Like, well, these are the pictures NASA let us see. So he's whistleblowing. They're covering stuff up.
Exactly.
Let us see. So he's very good at that, but you have to listen.
Yeah, you got to know. You got to know what. Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. But there's also that famous a clip with Buzz Aldrin refusing to lay his hand on the Bible. And I mean, that could be for one of two reasons. Either you don't conform to that, or B, it didn't happen. And that, they didn't go to the moon. And then also he's, one of the kids, there's that famous interview.
Yes, that's a very, very double negative. You got to follow what he's saying there. And that's a big deal. The point is, a lot of these guys, and then, Neil Armstrong, he, I think, refused to participate in the fraud by being photographed as the first man on the moon. There's no photograph of him. You're only seeing the second man on the moon.
Right.
So he, somewhere down the line, had said, I'm not going to be photographed as the first man. I'm not going to take this shit somewhere. He's a decent man. And they're in the military. They are doing a job. They're following orders. They are paid by the US government. That's what they say you do, and you do it. Interesting,
though. What is your take on, because I actually did a show not too long ago, and I think it was titled Alcatraz on the Moon, where there's this theory, and the show that I did, there was quite a bit of, I mean, you never know if this stuff is 100% legit, right? But basically, these 4 guys that went were actually prisoners in Alcatraz, and they escaped, and no one ever found them. And then later on, evidence is pointing that these were the 4 guys that supposedly did this moon expedition, but really more like mind-controlled 3-letter agency assets that obviously, I mean,
sounds a little bit like Apollo 20. It's a fiction of Apollo 20.
Yeah.
There were 3 Saturn V's, which they modified the final one to put the Skylab up. So that was Apollo 20. But there's a thing about Apollo 20 and the spiders on the moon, which there are spiders on the moon. That's a scary one, that one. And that's got too much incongruent, whatever the hell the bloody word is. There's too much stuff in there that can go wrong.
Incongruence.
I'm glad you. I just wanted to check if you could say it.
Incongruence.
Yeah, yes. Incongruent. See, I could say it, but I had to.
You had to make me look smart as well on the show today. Thanks.
Well, I work very hard at making other people look smarter. It's a rare talent to make other people look smarter. I have to work very hard on that. Only geniuses can do a thing like that.
Exactly. That's why I say only when you're the smartest guy in the room can you do that.
He's looking the other way in a guilty fashion.
Okay, but now listen, I want to talk about those spiders on the moon. Talk to me about the spiders on the moon, because there's a lot of spidery stuff coming out right now. And there's, just with SRA as well, speaking to a lot of the survivors, a lot of spidery kind of programming.
They're not dimensional beings you can see directly. And one of the problems about Video editors can see these things because video editors are trained to look at fast motion when they're scanning pictures to get an edit point on a screen. So so when you see something at 90 degrees out of the edges of your eyes, well, get that one on.
Yeah,
that's my peripheral vision, right? That's at 90 degrees to the reality you're looking at here. So stuff which is interdimensional, in other words, outside the 3D frame that we're cognitively thinking about, you'll see other things. The mistake people would have would be to turn and look.
and
There's
you
other
don't see it then.
The way the eyes work, it's got two types of you've got rods and cones. One type, I don't want to. One law is edge detection. So if you see something coming into your vision, you then turn because it's a reflex. It's designed to make you alert of something coming into your vision, like a predator or something that's about to sort of eat you, or something that like you're about to be hit by a truck. And then your center part of the eye is color. Will have the color information, which is one reason why they were able to make color TV work. Color TV has a very low resolution color image in the days of color television. For instance, the full TV picture would have a 5 megahertz signal, right? But the color picture, because the eyes, the detail resolution of color is much lower in the center. So when you watch a TV, which is over there, you're only perceiving color for a very small part of the eye, right? So they were able to frig the black and white signal and make it color by adding the same color signal into the black and white signal. So you didn't have to change everything. You could watch color TV or black and white TV on the same transmission. So that was one way they were able to frig it. Obviously nowadays, I've got running out of thing. I've got two things recorded. I've got flashing lights here. Time to go probably. The thing about it is that's how we watch color TV on a big screen, but then they have to increase the frequency of pictures being sent to you on a big screen so you don't see the flicker. That's right. So where are we with this? We're detecting other dimensional entities, and that's where you see the spiders. Now, where I was informed by an asset about the Lake District, which I talked to earlier about, and that's directly opposite. They had found a massive underground nest of really huge spiders. We're talking about things the size of a house. And Mars has got a whole lot of spiders. That's why David Bowie did the song The Spiders of Mars. And this is the whistleblower. This, I think it was Apollo 18, had spiders on the moon. And then the really big spiders, some people have said the web that they created in reality was the web of the universe, which other things then traveled down and created those things. So, and then you have very massive creatures of spiders and octopus beings, and they're 8-dimensional beings and stuff. So this kind of thing is training our consciousness to perceive outside the 3D space-time thing that the Einstein's lie was used to sell the corrupted physics. And we're dealing with a completely corrupted physics, and that's why we have to get past that corrupted physics, and then we'd be able to have 0-point energy and be able to move on. That's what exoconsciousness is all about, communicating outside that. But it also deals with talking to wildlife, animals. They're all consciousness beings.
Yes,
we are the people who've been. I mean, this is when I saw the Bob Lazar thing. That's just dropped out of record. The Bob Lazar film was this is my thing here. The Bob Lazar film. It's very important the way Bob Lazar referred to. I'm not into UFOs. I'm into the physics. And the way that he was able to describe this element 115 thing, that in our 3D space-time density, for want of a better term, it's extremely difficult to make element 115. It decays very quickly. It's not stable. But if you have elements in a solar system or a space-time field, again, I'm using these terms in probably inappropriately, but if you have a higher range of density, you can create elements which will be stable. So, and it was very important the way he said we only use the word the gravity wave. When the original Bob Lazar stuff came out with John Lear way back in 1989, and I was there in 92 with this, or 93 with my camera to see that picture of the object sitting there in the middle of space, and then it just glowed really bright and just gone, just like that. I wasn't allowed to film it, but that's what Lazar and people described it as this disc powered up, it would get very, very bright and then just go. He's talking about stable element 115. So the point about this is it's not something you can create in this space-time domain, because it won't be stable. But in other pressures, like in the ocean, you've got deep density pressure under with water, and this. So if you are in a different space-time domain, those more complicated and more what's so-called heavier substances would be stable. And that's the whole point about fluidic space. Fluidic space is not stable. So therefore, the mini that I saw at this alleged ET facility, where it was part of a communication device and involved with soul swapping humans with ET bodies and stuff, or the other way around. And the Germans were working on that and all that. That means that fluidic space, or dynamic density space, or space, some people then use a term called time density. So if the time density, like everything else, different things have different pressures and temperatures. So if you have time at a different pressure or density, different things happen with the rate of whatever you're involved with in that time density. Yes. So element 115 is something, and the first Joe Rogan show on this has got 66 million views. The most important things are the way that Bob Lazar on this film was only used yesterday, 2 days ago, Easter Sunday, I think it was. He was very careful to explain the gravity wave. He just used that, explained, he's using that as a term of the time, the day, 1989, right? That's the phrase he used to explain it. He also talked about how your hand, as you put the hand near this so-called reactor, it would push away. There was a repulsor force there. And I was in John Lear's house, and they had a model of this whole thing. It was absolutely fantastic.
Wow.
John, I'm of the opinion that they used John Lear, and they used they brought this physicist in. Some major event had happened with the Russians, and they needed something at 1988. 1988 again, when we broke Matrix with the pirate station Kiss FM. We cracked Matrix then. So things started to happen at that time.
Nice.
So the point is that he was very careful to describe that, you see, gravity is a fake force. So this is one of the cons of the Einsteinian physics that we've been taught. So we get captured and up an alleyway where we don't actually explain things properly because they've led us the wrong way. So it's some other force. So that other force or density of that material will work. That's why it's stable. But if you try to, it's like boiling water on Everest. right? If you boil water at the height of Everest, it will boil at a different temperature.
Temperature.
So it
Right.
doesn't get hot.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're essentially trying to make element 115 at the wrong air pressure, the wrong pressure.
Right.
So if they want to make element 115, they have to go to the right density of pressure,
Density
makes
makes
the
sense.
atoms work together, and then you have stable element 115. In other
Wow.
words, okay, I have to say, I think that's really quite clever, mentioning that. I think that's a work of genius.
I
Okay,
think it's
so
very
we'll
clever.
have to call it a day. Okay. But if you want to make
Absolutely.
your
Well,
element 115, get to the right space-time density and do it properly, and then it's stable.
well, it's always fascinating having conversations with you, that's for sure. And I look forward to next week. So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to just say, with the spiders, Penny Bradley also, as well as Arkim Rao, who's her son, speak a lot about that as well. The spiders on Mars, actually, I talk about spiders on Mars.
Yes.
And ant people, which is fascinating. I mean, these to me are just fascinating topics. They're amazing. I'd love to actually chat deeper about that at some point.
In Energy 106, I saw my first spiders bigger than my hand crawl off the equipment and move away. Looked like a giant tarantula and disappeared. So
Wow.
that's nicey spider, nicey big spider.
When
7,000
was it?
volts.
When was this?
This was inside the Energy 106 transmitter.
Wow.
On the final output valve, which is a big valve with 7,000 volts on it, which gave us about 8,000, 8 kilowatts of power, FM power, about 8.5 kilowatts. And that was we're trying to get as much power out of the transmitter as possible. And it's inside a cabinet. So you have to have it pressurized because you've got to send cooling air through that to keep it cool. And so you have to have it in a cabinet. Plus all the high power radio frequency RF is in there. And you don't want that spilling out everywhere. So that's the whole point of that, is to get it going up to the mast, up to the aerials, right? So when I opened this up, I wanted to get things to find. I was in a hurry, so I opened it up. And you've got to let the 7,000 volts discharge. You don't want to just say, put your hand on it and sort of DC, lethal. So that's a Mark Steele, lethal. And therefore, it was still intact on the valve, this big spider, bigger than my hand, right? So it was on the valve like this, and they work on intelligent energy.
Yeah, they do.
Whatever was going through that, they had this life form, and this was monitoring what was going into the transmitters, right? This is the last stage before it hits the antennas, right? So this thing, and I'm talking about something this wide. So this thing just moved off and just moved away and disappeared. And it was called a scuttler. Looks like a spider, moves like a crab. And it took about 5 or 6 years before somebody else said, yes, we've seen those, and they're called scuttlers. Sometimes they'll be in your ship. Or interdimensional insects. One of the people who were involved with Max Spears in Poland, she made some very, very fine line drawings of interdimensional insects. And they'd be on your head. So they'd be on your head and they'd be monitoring what's going on inside with your brain. They're called interdimensional insects.
Wow. That is insane. I would love to have a conversation like that. That is about
so
that sort of
information. So they were, and that's interesting, the way that the old style power supplies for your computers and things would always have spiders on them. And I know somebody, again, this asset, which explained to me an awful lot of things way back in 1993, 94. They have them in power stations. So our electricity, remember, electricity uses at least 3 different dimensions. You've got what they call the physical domain,
Yes.
and then you have the current domain, because of the coil that shifts into a negative number on the 1+1=0 graph, and then the capacitor produces a positive. Well, it produces a capacitive product, which we're told in physics, oh, we're just using this to make the calculations work. It doesn't actually exist. Well, if it doesn't actually exist, how the hell does it make anything work? Again, this is a lie they sell when they apply this, when they're training people. Oh, that doesn't exist. But we just use that to make the calculations work. It's lied to continually, and we accept these lies.
And it's enough already. It really is enough already.
Right.
It's enough
Okay.
lies. Yeah.
That's it. I'm going to say goodbye, and I don't know if we're going to have Sandra here doing her talk about meat.
Well, we got to have a conversation as well about that.
Yeah, well, it's very simply, Bob Osborne had cancer of the bowel, so he didn't have the medical thing. He did have it cut out. Right? But in order to make things work, he went onto a 100% high protein meat diet, which the vegan lovely lady, bearing in mind she's half Yemenis from the Middle East, her biology is going to be completely different to somebody who is in the freezing north and having to go kill bears and animals and eat flesh and stuff. So it depends it's whatever floats your boat, and that's going to be on Bob Osborne's channel, the man from Zenner. Okay.
Coolness and light. Well, thank you. Appreciate you very, very much. And we will see you. Are we permanently at this time slot now? Are we staying at 2 o'clock?
We're now in pretty summertime.
Okay.
Until we change back.
Well, no, this is the old slot we were always on. This is your usual time. I've gone back an hour. I don't mind, but I will let you know. I just want to let the viewers know that either I'm an hour late, I'm an hour earlier now.
Well, that's because you don't seem to have summertime. In America, they call it daylight savings.
No, we don't have anything like that. We just a flat time scale.
Very close to the tropics of what's the tropic of Cancer?
Capricorn. Tropic of Capricorn.
That's because your sun, when it sets, just goes from light to day. Is that right?
Yes, it's just we're all just sunny and light here.
Light, dark. Here we have a very long evening as it gets gradually darker.
Early, yeah.
That's why we have the different time zones, the different summer and time. Right.
Well, guys, we will let you know whether we're starting at 4 o'clock my time or 3 o'clock, but I think we'll leave it at 3 o'clock, which is Miles's usual time. So that'll make for South Africans an hour earlier, and anyone or Europeans as well. I think
just
you guys an hour earlier.
It's now 20 minutes to 4 here right now.
Well, it's 20 minutes to 5 here. It's 4:45.
Yeah.
So we started at 3 o'clock today, your time. We 2 o'clock, sorry.
2 o'clock from my time. Yeah. Right.
But that's your usual time. Okay, guys, take it easy. God bless. We will see you very
soon. The Americans do it a month before we do in Europe.
You're always a little bit behind the Americans anyway. I don't know what's wrong with you.
No, it's because we're further north than America is.
So it goes in waves. Yes, we excluded from that, thankfully. Okay, everybody.
Happy Easter to everybody, and have a nice Easter egg. I complained to last year. They've decided to take Easter eggs. It's not an egg. They've made it into an almond shape. They've collapsed an egg. We're going to save chocolate. So they have the egg.
I have your almond eggs.
And they've made it into this. It's like somebody sat on the bloody thing. It's good.
You got a flat egg.
Whoever did that. Right.
Happy Easter, guys. Enjoy your flat eggs.
Right. Bye. Have a good one.
Take it easy. We'll see you. I will see you back on Wednesday, everybody. Up until then, take it easy, smile nicely, be cool, be kind, and don't be good.